Color revolution, the American way. The nation chooses Barack Obama to move the America forward. Welcome to slavery. The new development in the horrifying story about everyday slavery in Moscow. Grace Kelly and her best friends. Astana is hosting an exhibition dedicated to Grace Kelly. Hello, I'm Asylbek Abdulov and you're watching Vlast KZ on KpLus channel.
6 ноября в Америке состоялись 57-е по счету президентские выборы.
The 57th presidential elections were held in the US on November 6. Barack Obama got his second term, collecting 303 electoral votes, 97 more than the 270 prerequisite against Mitt Romney's 206. Obama's 2012 campaign brilliantly utilized the reassuring one-word slogan forward, as opposite to the promise of change we can believe in back in 2008.
Он шел под девизом «Мы можем верить в перемены». Как пишут американские издания, важную роль в победе Обамы.
According to American press, the major role in Obama's victory was played by ethnic minorities. Experts believe that the second presidential term will finally make the rift between the Republican coalition and predominantly black youth insurmountable. The demographic forecasts also say that by 2042, the white population will inevitably lose its quantitative lead in the country.
The first polls will be closing in 10 minutes.
US presidential elections in Astana. An impromptu ballot kicked off at 6 a.m. at the US Embassy in Kazakhstan. Besides observing the elections on their native land, American diplomats have decided to find out who is more popular in Astana, the Democrat Obama or the Republican Romney. Embassy in Kazakhstan, bows, balloons, beds and even candies reflect all three colors of the American flag. If you look closely at the posters, the Democrats and Republicans are colored in blue and red. Sometimes you can differentiate the voters by color, yet this is not a criterion. Does any color prevail in percentage? I personally don't think so. And what's your favorite color? Blue. None of Kazakh diplomats made it to the US Embassy. Perhaps they choose to sleep in, or they might still be sore from pre-election incident when some US media spoke against participation of observers from Kazakhstan, saying that this country is not quite the example of freedom.
The situation in the United States now that you're seeing with a couple states making negative comments about election observers is all about domestic U.S. politics. This election is very, very hard fought with Republicans and Democrats each trying to get people to believe in their side. And there are some people, particularly on the Republican side, who believe.
The small U.S. state of Nevada is one of the 6 undecided states. Historically, most of the American states are very determined while voting either for Democrats or Republicans. The victory during the vote depends on swing states, which could support either one of the candidates. The atmosphere at the Republican headquarters is extremely tense. Lawyers sitting around the hotline telephones are ready to receive the reports of violation. Head of Republican campaign office, 49-year-old Heidi Smith, shows support to Republicans while making harsh statements against the policies of Barack Obama.
I don't care for Obama, I don't care for his wife, because his wife does not like white people. And she's made that perfectly clear. Obama, if he'd had more time to study politics.
Night of the elections in Reno, Nevada. Reno is a small Las Vegas, and both Republicans and Democrats seem to fund the casino, the perfect place to gather and witness the result of the vote. The women with shiny diamonds next to the proud, silver-haired white men, these are the average Republicans, and it's about 1,000 of them here. There's plenty of food, yet nobody's hungry. The candidate of elephants, Mitt Romney, lost in this race. Bye-bye Romney celebrate the Democrats, while the casino rather had older white Republicans. This all gathered mostly the young people of all colors. They all share the victory of Barack Obama, the 44th president of the freedom-loving America, with 303 votes against 206. I'm so happy that Romney lost. I voted for Obama because he cares about the simple folk. He thinks of them and does his best for them, creating jobs. It's never easy to run against the incumbent president because his name is known everywhere. In fact, Romney wasn't much behind. Once they count all the votes, you'll see. In addition to this, dissatisfied Republicans refer to administrative resources allegedly used by Obama during his campaign. Head of Political Science Department at University of Reno, Eric Herzik, predicted Obama's victory long before the elections. The map of preferences of Americans reflect the essence of the election race. The current scenario, the Republicans simply cannot win, says the political scientist.
Battle will go for Obama. But this vast area of the United States will largely go for Mitt Romney.
Anna Tigan moved from Ukraine to the United States 12 years ago, and she currently works in the diplomatic service. She supports the Democrats like many others who live in Washington, D.C. Anna believes that majority of Republican voters come from remote, rural areas, not being able to see the whole picture of politics in general. I voted for the Democrat. I believe he has made a lot to this country, in spite of numerous debates that he failed to fulfill his initial platform. But it only seems so. America is a big country, and it is very difficult to convince the voters who are not taking an active part in political life, whereas the Washington always offers plenty of opportunity to participate in the debates and understand the situation. The US used the plurality voting, which is also variously referred to as the winner-takes-all. When people vote for a candidate, they give their votes to the electors who represent the parties, who lay together in Washington to hold their vote. The number of electors in each state is equal to the number of their representatives in Congress. For instance, California has 2 senators and 53 House representatives, which make a total of 55 electoral votes. Should Obama win the electoral vote, he takes all the votes. It takes 270 of them to win the elections. That's exactly why the parties fight for the voters in each state. Ty Cobb is the former national security advisor for President Reagan and a professor of international politics. He rather supported Mitt Romney and the Republican platform during the elections. However, upon soberly evaluating the situation, Ty said that Obama couldn't lose.
Election in which they have to lean very strongly in the direction their party lies, what we call the base. So if you're a Democrat, you tend to go налево. If you're a Republican, you go more направо.
We couldn't help but ask such a prominent expert to comment on the Kazakh-American relations. Ty Cobb didn't beat around the bush, and after mentioning the importance of nuclear disarmament, said the following.
We are sympathetic to the challenges that are faced by your president in Kazakhstan.
Meanwhile, the impromptu US presidential elections in Astana only confirmed Obama's victory with 47 votes against 8. 1 vote was cast for the American comedian Rosanna Barr, while another vote to choose Lady Gaga as the President of the United States.
Адвокаты бывшего главы БТА-банка Мухтара Аблязова.
The lawyers of the former BTA bank owner Mukhtar Ablazov intend to challenge the Court of Appeal's decision to dismiss them from the case. This is their counter-move to the recently lost appeals regarding the 2 February rulings of the London's High Court. According to the first one, Ablazov was sentenced to 22 months of imprisonment for contempt. For second ruling, the banker had to turn himself in and reveal all information about his assets, otherwise he'd lose the right for defense in 8 claims forwarded by BTA Bank for the total amount of over $6 billion.
Мухтар Аблязов утверждает, что ему нечего скрывать.
Ablazov says that he has nothing to hide, and he already told the court that he was the owner of Kazakhstan's and Russian BTA, as well as banks in Georgia, Armenia and Ukraine. The new hearing was launched in London on November 7th, and the trial is not likely to end anytime soon. It looks like the court is British, while the legislation used is Kazakhstan's. Ablazov himself explains in the interview to KpLus how the development reached this stage and why Judge Steer seems to be biased.
Мухтар Аблязов рассказал в интервью K+.
Я находился в тот момент в Англии. БТА-банк посчитал, то есть, понятно, это власть Казахстана.
I was in the UK back then. The bank decided that it should file a suit in the UK since the defendant was there at the moment. The bank asked to hold the trial in accordance with Kazakhstan's legislation as well as Ukraine's and Russian where needed.
Соответственно, дополнительно еще Украина, Россия. Я по этому поводу не возражал.
I was fine with that, since I believe that in this situation the judge will have to look into Kazakhstan's legislation, listen to both parties, and involve experts in the matter. You'd have to understand the entire concept of the conflict from the point of view of Kazakh authorities' operation.
То есть он должен во всем разобраться. Но в процессе выяснились удивительные вещи.
However, some surprising things came up during the process. For instance, the dispute is reviewed in accordance with Kazakhstan's legislation, but the rulings on freezing assets are based on British laws. This means that the judge takes all of his decisions per British legislation before reviewing the case.
Дело по казахстанскому законодательству, я был убежден, что он учтет все факторы этого дела, включая политические.
But if the British judge took the decision to review the case in accordance with Kazakh legislation, he has to take all aspects of the issue, including political ones, into consideration. This is the judge's position now. He says that BTA Bank is a legal entity, which is independent from Samruk-Kazana, the government, or Nazarbayev. Basically, it is independent of current authorities.
А акционером Самрук-Казана, владельцем Самрук-Казана является правительство.
We counter that, saying that the bank is directly dependent on Samruk-Kazana and the government. The bank's management is practically appointed by the government decisions, whereas the bank says that it doesn't depend on the government or Samruk-Kazana and takes all the decisions on its own. That's the logic used by Judge Teare. He says that they're right, since according to the law on joint stock companies, BTA is in fact an independent joint stock company. Can you actually imagine BTA Bank not depending on Samruk-Kazana, Kazakh government, or Nazarbayev? Tell that to our citizens, and they will laugh at the idea. I believe the main reason for the Judge Teare's bias is his lack of understanding of our Kazakhstan's reality. That's why he dismisses the political component of the matter, whereas everyone in Kazakhstan understands that the key thing here is this very political component, and namely Nazarbayev's attempt to take away my property. Without this context, the trial won't be fair, even in theory.
Суд не может быть справедливым в принципе.
Продолжение разговора о банковском секторе.
More on the subject of banking sector once the pride and icing of the cake of Kazakhstan's market economy. Website Respublika has published many letters from its visitors regarding the complicated situation linked to Kazkommertsbank. Last week, an anonymous expert left his comment on the site explaining the background of the bank's problems. In several words, the state wants to take away Nurjan Subhanberdin's entire stake in the bank, almost repeating what happened to Ablazov.
Почти по сценарию БТА банка и Мухтара Аблязова. Далее в комментарии приводится предполагаемый сценарий.
The message goes into details of the possible takeover. The state will forcefully enter Kazkom as its major shareholder, backed by its crisis manager Kairat Kelimbetov. It is likely the state will be represented by Samruk-Kazana, and if so, the story with BTA's nationalization will come full circle. This is especially ironic since the initiative comes from Karim Masimov, who did the same to BTA Bank and Ablazov in 2009, while heading the cabinet. At the time, he also partnered Kelimbetov, the head of Samruk-Kazana Welfare Foundation.
Уже провернул подобную комбинацию с БТА банком и его главой Мухтаром Аблязовым. Смотрите во второй части.
Next on Vlast KZ.
Vlast KZ.
Welcome to slavery. The new development in the horrifying story about everyday slavery in Moscow. Grace Kelly and her best friends. Astana is hosting an exhibition dedicated to Grace Kelly. We will return with more in a couple of minutes. Stay with us.
Главные события в Казахстане. Достоверные факты. Эксклюзивные комментарии. Читайте в Казахстане информационно-аналитический портал «Республика». Чтобы обойти блокировки, воспользуйтесь доменом respublikas.info. Вы окажетесь на так называемом прокси-портале. Специально разработанные канадскими специалистами по интернет-технологиям, прокси-порталы помогают пользователям получать информацию в тех странах, где блокируют интернет-ресурсы – в Китае, Иране, в Казахстане. Вы принимаете условия использования системы и попадаете на страницу информационно-аналитического портала «Республика». Материалы интернет-портала также доступны пользователям всемирной сети Facebook facebook.com/respublika.kaz. Если вы хотите поделиться информацией, вам есть что рассказать, звоните в редакцию «Республики». Наши телефоны в Казахстане +7 727 273 92 95, в Москве +7 495 621 87 03.
Новости Казахстана на казахском языке смотрите в 21:00 и далее каждый нечетный час. Новости Казахстана на русском языке в 22:00 и далее каждый четный час. Новости Казахстана на английском языке смотрите в 16:30, 17:30, 18:30 и 19:30 со вторника по субботу. Время Астаны. Изготовление и размещение рекламы на канале Кплюс.
В прошлом выпуске мы рассказывали о фактах обыкновенного рабства в торговых точках на северо-востоке Москвы.
Last time on the show, we talked about the routine use of slave force in Moscow's retail outlets. At least 20 people were freed from slavery recently, including the 6-year-old Kazakh boy Bakhit, who had the misfortune of being born in slavery. Last week, the story saw unexpected development when a Russian TV crew investigating the incident was assaulted by the outlet's remaining staff, who don't consider themselves slaves and say they need no rescuing.
Творилась жизнь известная фраза, она же словесный палиндром, читаемый как слева направо, так и наоборот. Мы не рабы, рабы не мы.
We're leaving this place with hopes and praises to Allah that Nur-Sultan was born here. Who named him Nur-Sultan? How old is he? Zarina named him after the President Nazarbayev. He is 4 months old. Sitting in one room in the center of Moscow, Tajanar and Zarina don't leave each other's sight even for a minute. Only a week ago, Tajanar had no hopes to see her daughter ever again. Zarina worked in Moscow for 6 years in the store that belonged to Jansulu Istanbekova and Sakent Muzdabayev. They used to break my fingers for making mistakes at work. They haven't properly grown back together. Tajanar came from Kazakhstan only to save her daughter, yet she ended up rescuing her grandson, her sister-in-law Leila, her nephew Bakhit, and 11 other people. We were never allowed to go outside. In fact, they used to punish us for talking to customers. Everything was under video surveillance. There were about 10 people. When I told her I was going to quit, she called back her relative who beat me up with the keys for 2 hours. I still have scars he left on my back. At first, these people didn't want to tell us about what they have gone through in the past 6 years. Tajanar was arrested in Shymkent a few years ago. This happened because she wanted to save her daughter, says Tajanar. Supposedly, the store owner herself arrived in Shymkent and requested to hold Tajanar in detention for intimidation purposes. The investigators of Abay District Police, Yarbol Yesimov and Ruslan Bagaydarov, received bribes in the amount of $3,000, and they kept me in detention and threatened to put me in jail if I tried to go against them. Do you have a summon? Are you going to detain us? I will serve you a summon. This is Moscow, Russia. The police forcefully invites the citizens newly freed from slavery to Galyanovo DIA district office. You're going to comply with the lawful demands, are you? Colonel of Galyanovo DIA, Sergei Chisalov, personally arrived to escort the key witnesses. What seems to be the reason behind it, Chisalov himself have floundered in the explanations. Why don't you tell us who hired you and why did you end up there? We will only charge you under Article 322. The article on illegal immigration seems to be an issue here. Once the girls visit the Galyanovo DIA, they will be fined, deported, and everyone forgets about slavery case. Neither victims nor their lawyers want this to happen. It's the third day we're here for a face-to-face confrontation, but the store owners still haven't been detained. Where are the victims? Yet they want to arrest us. The person filming is also a police officer of Galyanovo. Zarina Ashirova couldn't help but throw accusations addressed to those who were covering the slave owners for 6 years. I saw how local police officer used to come over and take bribes. They've learned to ignore the cameras during the week upon their release. Listening to their conversations with the shocking details of their former life, it is hard to imagine what they've gone through. She also told me to kill my disabled baby or get rid of him by placing him into an orphanage. We completely forgot to mention this. We suffer memory loss from the head injuries inflicted by all the beatings. Leyla gave birth to 3 children while in captivity. Currently, Bahut is the only child left. Her first daughter was taken to Kazakhstan, and 2 years later, Leyla found out that her daughter died falling from the 2nd floor of the building. Leyla's second son was taken away to an unknown destination by Jansulu Istanbekova. The infamous slave owners are still remembered by the residents of their native village of Turbat, yet they are all scared to speak on camera. However, we've managed to record something. Turns out the entire village knows that Jansulu and Saken offer the local residents to work in the stores in Moscow. The homes of those who were invited to work in Saken and Jansulu stores are located behind these houses. People refuse to talk about those who don't return, even off the record. Since 2007, we've received complaints of 3 females who became victims of this store. The comments made by Sana Sizin legal center psychologist from Shymkent sounded like a revelation. Apparently, everyone in southern Kazakhstan knew about the human trafficking scheme for 5 years. When their father died in 2006, the neighbors saw how desperate they were and recruited them to work in Moscow, promising that they will be able to earn enough money to buy an apartment and a car within 1 year period. This is the story of the former slave Zulfiya. She prefers to keep her real name undisclosed. Zulfiya managed to escape from the Moscow store of Galyanova district over a year ago. When I escaped, the policemen have sent me back. Her child was taken away as well. Luckily, later in Kazakhstan, she found him and managed to get him back. In the meantime, Zulfiya's sister is still in captivity. Therefore, Zulfiya tries her best to help those who couldn't escape. While people in Kazakhstan sent inquiries to the General Prosecutor's Office, the Moscow journalists are investigating this case. Turns out, even a simple visit to one of the stores owned by the slaveholders is life-threatening. We've entered the store and asked if we could talk to Jansulu, the owner of the place. The vendor ladies immediately scattered, and next thing we know, there are 15 Kyrgyz or Kazakh guys around us who then started to wring our hands. They took away our camera phones and even work IDs. Yet most importantly, they took away our tape, which now they certainly deny, claiming to know nothing about it. The liberated Kazakhstan citizens are free to go home already. The Embassy of the Republic of Kazakhstan provided all of them with travel IDs, although rendering them no further assistance. They will have to locate the travel money on their own. In the meantime, the victims visit the investigative department along with volunteers and lawyers on a daily basis to prevent the criminal case from closing down and to at least have the slaveholders receive the status of suspects. Neither Jansulu Istanbekova nor Saken Mozdabayev is currently considered so, whereas nobody even mentions about finally paying them all the salaries due for several years.
Воспитанники Алматинского детского дома номер 1 начинают привыкать.
Kids in an Almaty foster home are getting used to the frequent visits of the prosecution office employees. The inspections were caused by an article in the newspaper Vremya exposing the facility's hazing rituals, violence and forced isolation in mental institutions for disobedient pupils.
Воспитатели детского дома считают это клеветой.
The teaching staff say they've been slandered in a complicated plot to raid the foster home's precious landlord in Baganashil.
Расположен детский приют.
Yelena Anzuleyeva chooses presents for children. Birthdays for Sasha and Alena are coming up this week in the orphanage number 1 of Almaty region. The volunteer Yelena is trying her best to please the kids. This MIDI speaker that feeds off USB is a present for Sasha Karpukhin. The boys are happy to receive such gifts because no one would give them this kind of presents in the orphanage. The Anzuleyev's family visits Baganashil orphanage every week. Yelena, also known among orphans as Aunt Yelena, says that she first visited the orphanage a year ago, and ever since her large family with 5 kids of her own became even bigger, including 30 orphans. The orphans have prepared dancing and musical performances to express their gratitude for the guests. Through the simple plays, kids express something they don't experience themselves, the relationship between children and parents. At times, their performances is quite ironic. Daddy, daddy, my dear daddy, he helps me out just any time. He earns a lot, he's rich already, while the rest we just don't mind. A bit later, the Baganashil orphanage was visited by expected yet uninvited guests from Prosecutor General's office. We came empty-handed because we didn't know about the celebration. You should have told us in advance. The orphanage number 1 is under investigation of the oversight body. There have been reports of child abuse. That is why our reporters' crew decided to visit the Baganashil orphanage themselves. Turned out the foster children have prepared a surprise for the prosecutors. In the name of Allah, we came here without a gift, but leaving with one. That's not right. Thank you for your kind words. The orphanage inspection followed the publication in Vremya newspaper. The article contained an interview of Anna Kalmakova, the sister of Konstantin, one of the foster children. In the article, she shared that orphans are subjected to bullying and physical abuse, and those who are intractable are even placed in the psychoneurological clinic. We tried to contact Anna, however, her mobile phone was turned off for a few days in a row. There were certain alarming signs, and we've looked into it and had counseling with the children. Let the prosecutors establish the truth. There is nothing more I can say. Yes, we already addressed this to Prosecutor General's office. However, despite the statement of the department head Gulnar Yermekbayeva, they emphasized that the investigation itself has been initiated by the authorities. We were instructed by the higher officers, whereas the letter from the Department for Child Protection was received already during the investigation. Our reporters' crew failed to meet with the lead characters of the revelatory article, a foster kid Darmen and a teacher Zhana Rapai. At the orphanage, we were told that both of them are currently on leave, which only made us wonder whether it is only a coincidence. Nevertheless, the mentors allowed us to talk to the rest of the foster children and ask them any questions. Children were excited and breathless to share how wonderful their foster home is, saying that no violence takes place there. Have you guys been going through many inspections lately? Yes, quite a bit. Here they don't divide us into good and bad children, we're all treated equally well. It has long been over, you won't see this anymore. Why? It's a different generation, the people are different now. The boy who was allegedly forced into a mental hospital is a 6th grader Kostya Kalmakov. He was actually sent to the neurological clinic for medical examination, where he was prescribed medication and receives a psychological treatment, says the foster child Indira Bikpatyrova. This is the only instance of such kind that she recalls. He was not quite sent to a mental institution, as a nurse says. He was simply receiving medication and seeing the psychologist. That's about it. The reason behind this was his suspicious behavior. In fact, the teachers in our school were complaining that he acted beyond logic and sometimes very belligerent. The mentor Tatiana Tamilova says that the atmosphere in the orphanage is very tense. The children of the orphanage have read the article and have been constantly discussing it lately. Moreover, the frequent inspections don't seem to make it easier on them. They try to present themselves the best they could in order not to have the foster home shut down. Even as adults, we also keep in our minds that we're afraid the orphanage might be shut down. We're located in a very prestigious area with all the luxurious houses and expensive cars around here. Perhaps the kids hear us talk about it and simply notice everything themselves. We were expecting to hold a journalistic investigation of the child abuse instances. However, the orphanage mentors suddenly unveiled another version of the situation for us. The orphanage is located in the foothills of Baganashil, which is considered one of the most prestigious areas of the city. Apart from a large land lot and the institution itself, the orphanage owns a country house and a large farm on the foothills. The mentor Yulia Frolova says the frequent inspections create difficulties for the leadership as well. Investigators sort through the documents and constantly talk with the orphans, trying to verify the credibility of the information in the article. Frolova believes that inspections interfere with the normal functioning of the orphanage. She's also convinced that Anna Kalmakova was instructed on what to tell the newspaper. She comes from a very dysfunctional family and her parents are dead. I don't mean to be rude, but considering her mental capacity and her past, I'm confident that she couldn't have done it alone. Perhaps someone forced her into it or maybe offered her a deal. No one ever published anything like that in the newspapers. Even her own brother Sergei Kalmakov, who came by, told me that they no longer stay in touch. We referred to a charitable society director Aruzhan Sain for clarification. She's familiar with the Baganashil orphanage since the 90s. She used to work as a youth leader at the summer camps for the orphan kids and often visits the institution up to date. If you need to replace somebody, the easiest way to do so is by accusing a person of something terrible which will affect his dismissal. Nobody cares if it's true or not, as long as the person receives a bad publicity. Most likely no one would question the credibility of the information. Nothing really changes, yet the damage is already done. The law that facilitates the custody requirements and foster care for orphans, which was adopted last year, is the first step, says Aruzhan. She believes the next required step is to develop this field. There are about 13,000 orphans in the country, and the government monthly spends more than $600 for each of them. These are sufficient funds arranged for an orphan to live in a family. This would help solving the issue of orphans along with unemployment.
Платить 93 тысячи тенге.
If you pay $615 to a woman who takes custody of a child, let's say it's going to be $850 or $1,000 instead of $1,200, but this would cover the food, clothing, and even some extracurricular activities for the children. There are kindergartens, schools, and health centers, so it would be easier to keep an eye on a child. Monthly reports would be one of the requirements. In the meantime, the Joint Committee is putting together reports on Baganashil orphanage. Their final statement will determine its future. There seems to be a stalemate situation with mentors and administration willing to keep their jobs on the one hand and oversight agencies investigating the issues of the orphanage on the other. Yet the children are trapped in between and the system doesn't seem to be concerned with their future.
Заключение выпуска, материал о выставке памяти.
We'll finish the program with a story about an exhibition dedicated to Grace Kelly. The star's son, Albert II, Prince of Monaco, together with President Nazarbayev, opened the event in Astana's Peace and Harmony Palace.
60-я принцесса Грейс являлась культовой фигурой, и теперь можно сказать, что она стала неким прообразом принцессы Дианы.
Kelly was a cult figure in the 60s, almost a Princess Di prototype, another troubled symbol of a generation. She escaped the Cinderella story, born in the family of a rich industrialist, an Olympic champion father and a model mother, with an uncle who's won a Pulitzer Prize. Kelly came from a high school background, but preferred to live according to her own rules, a trait praised by many, including Alfred Hitchcock and others. This unreachable beauty and celebrity is now on display in Astana.
Проросла тропа на неделе и в Астане.
A Kazakh national fox-fur-head became another brick in the diplomatic bridge between Kazakhstan and Monaco. President Nursultan Nazarbayev presented the traditional Kazakh headdress to Prince Albert II during the opening ceremony of the Grace Kelly exhibition. Kazakh journalists were invited to attend the opening but then asked to leave the exposition hall. The ceremony was recorded by the Kazakh president's TV radio complex cameraman to be made as a 30-second muted video that was later sent to the local TV channels. The two countries entered into diplomatic relations when the ambassador of Kazakhstan instituted legation to the Kingdom of Monaco 3 years ago. The consulate of Monaco is now open in Astana. The microstate provides every opportunity for high-end leisure to billionaires from all over the world. Every year they flock to the Côte d'Azur to attend the September yacht show. The Kazakhstan travel agencies feature special tours to Monaco priced at €950 per day. The must-visit tourist attractions include casinos, Formula One race, and the Grimaldi monarchic family palace. However, those who can't afford a trip to Monaco now have a chance to contemplate the diamonds of Princess Grace Kelly during this month in Astana. I've been to Monaco before. I visited several museums but didn't happen to see the Grace Kelly exhibition. So I came here as soon as I saw an advertisement on TV. I knew that she won the Academy Award, so I wanted to see the Oscar statuette. Besides, I have great respect for this family and its history. This exhibition features so much to look at, and the visit of Prince Albert is sure to further forge relations between Kazakhstan and Monaco. Every exhibition hall is devoted to a certain stage of Grace Kelly's life, from the Hollywood adventures to adopting the Principality of Monaco. There are more than 30 dresses, including the one she wore for the wedding, 85 pieces of jewelry and numerous fashion accessories, such as the famous Kelly bags, made by a well-known French designer brand in the last century. Every fashion-forward woman in the capital of Kazakhstan deems it duty to have one, despite the $50,000 price tag. This possibility to dive into the world of luxury certainly brings new discoveries. I was glad to see this kind of exhibition in our museum. I believe such events will signify Kazakhstan as a prosperous country recognized by the world community. In turn, why not hold exhibitions devoted to our local celebrities in Monaco? However, not all exhibition visitors were sharing the excitement. The grey-haired women in kerchiefs seemed to have little interest for fancy hats, sunglasses, and Hollywood-style floor-length evening dresses. There are so many beautiful dresses at the exhibition, although I must admit I don't know who Gracie Kelly is, as my daughter was the one to bring me here. Instead, I'd rather attend an exhibition devoted to our local actors and singers, such as Roza Rymbayeva, Medina Yeralieva, and Makbal Junusova. The organizers of the Grace Kelly exhibition in Astana didn't expect so many people of different age and status to take an interest in the real-life Cinderella's history. 500 to 600 people come to the Monaco Monarch's exposition daily. They range from school children on holiday, tourists, to occasional visitors from the Peace Palace located nearby. Initially, our target audience was described as an affluent woman who would be interested to take a look at Grace Kelly's clothes and jewelry, but the typical visitor appeared to be an average Kazakhstan citizen curious about the country's first exhibition of the royalty personal effects. The Member of Parliament Aygul Solovyova typifies the organizers' initial target audience. She always draws attention of her legislature colleagues with a well-cut suit and expensive jewelry. The deputy said that attending expositions devoted to famous people was her hobby, so she was happy to accept the invitation to the Grace Kelly exhibition. It is always interesting to learn a little more about day-to-day living of VIPs. We usually see the final result of their achievements, while what really matters is what it took them to get there. The exhibition shows that Grace Kelly's parents were the Olympic champions and her mother quit sport for parenting. Everyone sees the outcome, but it's also important to understand the process of education, the background and endeavors preceding the result. To me, the journey is more important than the destination. Grace Kelly and her husband Prince Rainier III were major political figures in their country. They helped Monaco to find its niche and obtain independent statehood. According to Aygul Solovyova, the major category of the exhibition visitors are people engaged in business and public activities who, just like Grace Kelly, want to become prominent figures or at least boast an impressive wardrobe. The dresses behind me picture a woman taking good care of herself to maintain status and culture, be a good wife and mother, and remain a professional in demand. The Princess of Monaco's diamond collection left Aygul Solovyova enchanted. The Kazakh deputy noted she too had a few gems in her small collection of jewelry. I love every diamond, even the smallest one, as long as it's pure and has a perfect cut. Any sign of inclusion indicates an incomplete mineralization process. Only a flawless diamond with a beautiful cut is of interest for me as a chemist and a woman. The process of transition from a rough diamond to a sparkling piece of jewelry brings the gem to a totally new status. The exhibition in Astana features the genuine diamond colors and diadems displayed in special showcases, which make altogether over 85 pieces of fine jewelry. These treasures now sparkle in private collections. The organizers from Kazakhstan had to conclude rental contracts with each of the owners. The showpieces are closely guarded from approaching visitors and photo cameras. Unfortunately, there are not many exhibitions held in Astana, so we try to attend all of them. We've seen quite a few movies featuring Grace Kelly, who was Hitchcock's favorite actress. This exhibition is a great opportunity to experience a touch of history. Here we see her pieces of wardrobe that still look fashion sharp. This definitely makes the event worthy of attention. $2 million are reported to have been spent to bring Grace Kelly exhibition to Astana. The organizers emphasized that the funds were provided by the local anonymous sponsors. Not only the Kazakhstan citizens, but also the President Nursultan Nazarbayev himself truly enjoyed the cultural event. For them must be a good reason to bring royal diamonds from overseas. You were watching Vlast KZ on KpLus channel. Every week we look at the people and events that made the last few days stand out. Goodbye.